Rocky 3, best 80s movie that ever came out of that decade.
Greatest star battle, in my opinion, in Star Wars history is Return of the Jedi over the Death Star. That's awesome.
And I'm talking about First Blood from 1982, starring the legendary Sylvester Stallone.
But Silver Bullet got everything I want in a werewolf movie.
The Empire Strikes Back for me is the greatest film ever made. Not the greatest Star Wars film ever made, the greatest film ever made.
And my dad said, okay, you like Star Wars, you like aliens, well, here you go. Here's Predator.
One of the greatest trilogies of all time, and the Back to the Future is just phenomenal time.
Rocky 4 came out at the exact perfect time, 1985, which I think 85, to me, is one of the most important years in cinema.
Robin Williams' performance, exceptional.
I picked up Bloodsport multiple times, and it inspired me to be in Taekwondo for 3 years when I was in middle school and high school.
RoboCop was just the best.
What's going on, everyone? My name is Jason. You're watching Backtrack Cinema, and welcome to my top 50 80s films of all time. I can't believe we are finally here. Ever since I started this channel, Backtrack Cinema, I've been wanting to do this video. As you know, I've been doing a lot of 80s rankings since I've started the channel, talk a lot of 80s movies, and I love the decade. I love 80s movies, so I wanted to do a top 50 80s films of all time. But I am not in this all by myself. I got 14 fabulous guests who have all become really good friends of mine, awesome content creators, people that I suggest you go out and check out all their channels. And so this is going to be a blast. I'd also like to point out, just because your favorite movies are not on this list, it's okay. This is one of the, if not the hardest list I have ever tried to do. There's some great iconic movies. Fantastic films didn't make this list. Like, we could do a part 2 and a part 3 of this. 50 great films came out every year in the 80s, never mind the whole freaking decade. So this was tough. This will get you to know me a lot more and my taste too, especially if you're new to the channel, you haven't know what my taste is and what I like to see in movies. This will give you a very good idea. So make sure you look out in the corner, the ET symbol right there. Whenever that shows up, that means we're going to be going into a segment where a guest talks about one of their favorite 80s movies. So without further ado, let's get on with it and let's talk some 80s movies. So coming in at number 50 is Raiders of the Lost Ark. With the new Indiana Jones movie coming out, you know, I went through a little binge of a lot of these movies, and it's kind of funny. Like, this is not one that I remember as a kid that much. I've maybe seen this film 3 times, but when I watched it, everything is so iconic about it. And it was a last minute decision. I go, this has to be on my top 50 80s movies. This movie is so fun, did so much for that genre, the adventure action genre. We get a great character with Harrison Ford, who's witty, who's charming. To me, he's like this Energizer bunny. He keeps going and going and going and going. He just crashes. You know what I mean? There's that one scene where she's like, Indy, you're not the man I knew 10 years ago. It's like, it's not the years, darling. It's the mileage. Love it. Absolutely love it. So this movie, you know, did so much. But I actually watched Temple of Doom and Last Crusade a lot more growing up as a kid. But every time I put this one on, I have a blast with it. I mean, we're going to talk more in depth about this series and about this movie. But yeah, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Fantastic. Hey there, I'm Steve Merlo of Sequanda Films, and I'm here to tell you about my love for Return of the Jedi, the greatest Star Wars film in my opinion. Luke Skywalker is badass in this film. He's finally become the Jedi we've wanted him to be since the beginning. The greatest star battle
in my opinion, in Star Wars history is Return of the Jedi over the Death Star. That's awesome. We've got the Ewoks. Now, I know some people don't like the Ewoks. I personally love them, though. I absolutely love them. And then the Emperor. Ian McDiarmid as the Emperor. He is so awesome. I can't believe he's in his 30s when he played this role. Great makeup job, but also fantastic acting from Ian McDiarmid. Then my favorite thing about the movie, of course, is the redemption of Darth Vader. I think it's so amazing. The emotion, the conflict you see in him is just so perfectly done. A great moment in cinematic history. That is why I think Return of the Jedi is the greatest Star Wars film, and in my top 5 films of all time.
Carpe diem, one and all. The reason I love Dead Poet Society so much is because, one, it really inspired me to become a writer. I fell in love with just how it is an ode to the writing process, to just poetry itself, and just a beautiful story about growing up and like learning those type of experiences. I thought it was a beautifully done movie, and then the whole Carpe Diem thing, seize the day, like I've always taken that as a part of my life to seize every moment I'm in. So whether that's, you know, whatever it is, just to be able to live in the now, seize this moment, and hold on to it. And it's so beautiful, I want to get it tattooed to me, seize the day, or Carpe Diem. My principal at my high school used to always say it, and so it had the kind of a personal connection to me. And so that's why Dead Poet Society is my favorite movie of the 80s. And not to mention also, Robin Williams' performance, exceptional. That's why this is like my favorite movie of the 80s. I just think this movie is spectacular, and it's just an absolutely beautiful and nuanced and layered story about just never giving up. And yeah, that's why I love Dead Poet Society.
Coming at number 44 is Conan the Barbarian from 1982. Now, Conan's what really put Arnie on the map. Terminator just launched his career, though. You could tell he was new on the scene. His performance as Conan fits the character. It's not fantastic. Like, it's not great acting like some of his delivery, but he was a beast in this movie. They got him for his size, and he just really embodied this character, really. It all works, and I just love the quest of revenge that he goes on. I mean, the opening scene to this movie is probably my favorite. I absolutely love it when he's a kid and his dad's talking to him about the riddle of steel and how you must learn its discipline. Great dialogue here. And then the attack on the village is just music going on through it. I absolutely love it. And then you see him be taken as a slave to a warrior. And then, you know, he falls in love. He meets friends. The woman he loves dies. Then he really goes on this quest of revenge after Thulsa Doom, played by James Earl Jones, who's absolutely fantastic in this movie. The set pieces are great. The effects are dated now. You look back at this movie, but this was always my favorite fantasy movie before Lord of the Rings came along. And I do have a soft spot for Conan the Barbarian. It had to be on this list with one kick-ass score. How do you not get jacked when that friggin' dun 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 dun? It just really gets the blood pressure up, gets you excited, and make a great heavy metal score. So Conan the Barbarian is awesome. Coming at number 43 is the John Hughes classic, Uncle Buck. John Candy, my favorite comedian, my favorite funny guy. I love this dude. I love this guy so much. And Uncle Buck is just a great character. The way he kind of reconnects with his family in this movie, his nieces and nephews, and really helps them. And the way they set this character up, he's really going nowhere in his life. He won't commit to anything, but he's there for his family. You know, you can count on him in those situations. And there's lots of laughs in this. I always remember that scene when I was a kid when he's throwing the birthday party from Macaulay Culkin, and he makes the huge pancakes, and he needs a shovel, and he's like, time to separate the men from the boys. Absolutely love that. And John Candy just brings a lot of charm to this character, and you just really love him. Coming at number 42 is Overboard. I love this Kurt Russell classic with him and Goldie Hawn.
What? No boom boom? Hey, I understand. You probably just want to go right to sleep and skip the fun stuff, huh?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. No boom boom.
Their chemistry is just fantastic to see them on screen. Real life couple. It's just a nice family comedy that can really hit you in the feels, where he's this carpenter who does this work on this really big, rich yacht, meets this woman who starts out as a bitch, throws his tools all overboard, and then she gets amnesia. She takes him home and makes her raise his kids and do all the housework. And that's some of the funniest stuff, that real montage when Goldie Hawn is doing all the housework on the farm, and she just comes home, goes, ba, 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 ba. And the kids are fantastic in it. And just, good, rom-com, 80s family comedy that is fantastic.
What's up, guys? Mel coming at you from My Killer Podcast, and today we're going to be talking Bloodsport and why it's a special movie in my heart. You guys have heard me talk a lot about my mom's stir, but I don't talk a lot about my dad's stir. So growing up, my mom was the horror queen, which is where I get my love for horror movies, but my dad was the action king, which is also where I equally get my love for action. When I was going into our local movie store, I wasn't just running to the horror section, I was running to the action section, and I picked up Bloodsport multiple times, and it inspired me to be in Taekwondo for 3 years when I was in middle school and high school. I am a second-degree black belt, and I will kick your butt. Have a killer day.
Coming at number 36 is Silverado. Now, I hope a lot of you have heard of this movie, because I find a lot of people just do not talk about this movie, and this has one of the best casts you will ever see in this movie. It's a Western that really drops you into this world, and it's romanticized, a lot of it. Like, you're watching this movie, you just go, man, I want to go out to the Old West, get a horse, travel with a bunch of dudes, shoot some shit up. It's very romanticized. And the characters, I mean, we have everyone in this. Kevin Kline, Kevin Costner, Brian Dennehy, Danny Glover. You even get some horror alumni like Jeff Fahey, Ted White, Amanda Weiss. I mean, just everybody you can think of is in this movie, man. And the way they drop you into the story and how all these characters come together, the fight, injustice, and it's, very at the heart of it is a lot of family themes. You got each character going through their thing, but it all centers into family. Like Danny Glover's, his dad gets run off his farm and he gets killed, and then it's about vengeance for him. Then he's got to reconnect with his sister, and you got Scott Glenn and Kevin Costner are brothers, and they got to fight injustice against Brian Dennehy, who is the evil sheriff, and it's just fantastic. Brian Dennehy, by the way, great villain in this, absolutely terrific. It's just got so many one-liners. It's entertaining as hell. And these nice, wide Western epic shots are just fantastic. I mean, there's not enough time to talk about this movie, guys, but try and hunt out Silverado if you haven't seen it. It's fantastic. Coming at number 35 is Psycho 2.
It's starting again.
Now, Psycho 2 is just one of the great sequel slashers of the 80s. I mean, doing a sequel 22 years apart from the original Psycho and actually living up to that, and even some people believe that this is the best Psycho movie. And I wouldn't really argue against that, even though I love the original so much, and it's like one of my favorite, if not my favorite horror film of all time. Psycho 2, this does something really great about very much a slow burn again. That knife kill done on Lila Crane, I hope it's Lila Crane. It's been a while, guys. In the mouth. Oh, that terrified me as a kid. That was just like, oh man. And just the way it's psychological too. The way they're leaving Norman notes and from his mother, and dressing up as Norman Bates' mother, getting into Norman's head again and really pushing him over that edge. And it works, man. It's actually kind of a sad ending, but an awesome ending too. Where he's standing out there and the storm's coming in, and Norman's back with Mother again in his mind. And fantastic sequel, man.
I saw Stand By Me for the first time when I was about 9 years old. I watched it with some of my family who rented it when it was first released on VHS. I had no idea what the movie was about when I started watching it. For some reason, I actually thought it was going to be a war movie. I don't know why. It's definitely not a war movie. But from the moment I watched it, it instantly became one of my favorite movies of all time, to this day even. Watching a movie about kids around my age who didn't really have the best home lives and decided to do something to make themselves feel more important or feel seen, and who go on this very adult adventure. It was relatable to me at that age, and it made me want to do those things too. The movie's funny, it has heart. The scene where River Phoenix talks about how everyone thinks he stole the milk money, it makes me tear up every time I watch that scene. He is such a fantastic actor. I mean, really, all the boys in that movie are. And there's so many memorable scenes too. The pie eating contest scene is so good. I could not believe what I was watching the first time I saw that. And as someone who was bullied as a kid, I just thought that was the best revenge ever. There are so many other memorable scenes, like the leeches, the boys outrunning the train, and then there's the scene where they actually find the young boy's body. That scene just takes the breath out of you because you're anticipating them finding it the entire film, and then they do, and the level of maturity and compassion they show by not even taking credit for finding the body is just so deep and moving. It's such a beautiful film, and it really holds up. Every time I watch it, it reminds me of what it's like to be a kid.
Cinema has asked me to do a short video about my favourite film from the 80s. And there's far too many to mention, but one that came straight to mind was
Something strange in the neighborhood. Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters!
So this is one I saw in the cinema back when it came out in late 84, I believe, in the UK, and it's been a favourite of mine ever since. After seeing it in the cinema, I had to wait about 6 months before it came out on VHS, and then the Saturday we picked it up on rent. My friends and I watched it 3 times in a row. It's that good of a film. One of the things I picked up back then was this lovely book, which is the storybook. I used to trace this picture on the back a lot, trying to recreate it and put badges everywhere. I even had a glow-in-the-dark sweatshirt. So the white of the ghost used to glow, but I lost that, unfortunately, but there we go. So there we are. There is my favourite film of the 80s. Great sci-fi comedy, horror, and it even has a fantastic soundtrack as well. So thanks for watching. Here ends the lesson.
Hey everybody, welcome to Facci Cinema. I'm your boy Facci, and I am here to talk about one of the best werewolf movies, in my opinion, of all time. I don't hear it mentioned up there with the other bad boys, but my favorite would definitely have to be Silver Bullet. The chemistry between the characters in this film, Corey Haim and Gary Busey's characters, Uncle Red and Marty, they just connect so well that it adds a different layer on top of a typical werewolf film. Is the werewolf in this movie the best? Some say no. I say it's not that bad. It doesn't bother me. Definitely a different take on what a werewolf looks like. But this movie has charm. This movie probably has more heart than any other werewolf film to date. In my opinion, you're probably wrong if you think otherwise, but I'm going to let you think that you may be right. But Silver Bullet got everything I want in a werewolf movie. It got cool atmosphere, great characters, amazing family vibes, got a lot of heart in this movie. You fall in love with Marty, you know, the kid in the wheelchair. He got the souped up Silver Bullet wheelchair that goes 60 miles an hour. Oh my gosh, Everett McGill as the pasture and / werewolf. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. I mean, the movie is like 30 years old. But it is up there for me, and it has always had a special place in my heart, and it is always a werewolf movie that I go back to. And if you have not seen it, I highly recommend checking out Stephen King's Silver Bullet from the book Cycle of the Werewolf. I really recommend this movie, and I cannot put it out there enough. One of the best werewolf movies ever made. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Coming at number 27 is Visiting Hours. Now, this is a film I've been watching almost my whole life, very young age. So, yeah, it did scare me as a kid. I mean, Visiting Hours is a hospital slasher. It's a great film that seems like a stalk and slash movie, but there's just things and elements in it that really bring it up. And one of them is Michael Ironside's performance as the killer. He's a guy who's hates women, and he was also a real kind of a bigot, like anything that he disagrees with. This TV journalist of Deborah Ballin enrages him, sets him off because she stands up for women's rights and all this kind of stuff. And he goes the killer at the beginning of the movie. At the beginning of the movie, it's almost like the end of most movies, and he fails, and then he has to spend the rest of the time getting her in the hospital, and things unfold in this movie. And the movie's more creepy than scary, I would say. It's got a real creepy vibe to it, but the tone is so consistent That's what I really love. The tone's consistent. There's great music in this. It's an underrated movie, man. And I mean, this guy he takes pictures of his victims after these women die. Whenever he kills one, then he develops these pictures and he makes a skull in his closet out of it. Stuff like that is creepy. There's a great scene with a beer bottle where he smashes his arm to get into the hospital. Just crazy, crazy stuff in this movie. And I can't talk about this movie enough. You gotta go watch Visiting Hours, and watch it, man, and then let me know about it, because it's one of my favorite horror films and slasher films, and one of my favorite 80s films. Number 26 is David Cronenberg's The Fly. I mean, I love this movie. It takes you on such an emotional ride for sure. Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis are absolutely fantastic in this. It's a movie that starts off as sci-fi, but I think it takes a hard right into horror. Body horror, seeing this guy turn into this fly from this experiment. And, you know, there's that romance too. And that's what's so heartbreaking at the end of it, where he's just completely turns into this grotesque fly. And, you know, just the emotion Gina Davis has to go to and the depth she has to go to with her acting is amazing. And the practical effects David Cronenberg gives us in this is just amazing. They are really grotesque and like, just like, oh, like this. But he makes you watch. Every time you think he's going to cut, you're not going to see something, he shows it to you. You know what I mean? And that's just fantastic. He really kind of like reverts expectations, if you know what I mean. And yeah, I love The Fly so much, man. It's just awesome. Coming on number 25 is The Karate Kid. We're heading kind of into the Ralph Macchio section now, guys. The Karate Kid, I think, is fantastic. It is a really kind of slow burn. This kid comes out to LA with his mom, and you know, he's being picked on, he's being bullied. He learns karate from this old wise neighbor, you know, the custodian in his building, and they form this really father-son kind of relationship, and a relationship they both really needed, just didn't know it. And I just love seeing Mr. Miyagi, you know, train Daniel, and I just love seeing this relationship really build. The character development is really good, and there's such a great payoff at the end of this movie. The Terminator fight is great. All the motives of the characters are great. One particular scene that always gets me, though, that I absolutely love, is because Daniel, even though he was bullied, he starts a lot of shit too. Like, he's got a lot of piss and vinegar in him. You know, he hasn't really learned respect. Where Daniel finds Mr. Miyagi drinking to his dead wife and kid, how they died years and years ago, and every year he gets drunk and, you know, he passes out. Daniel puts him to bed, and then he bows. He does that bow, right? Showing that this kid has really learned respect and really grown to love his teacher and love this guy like a father. And I love Karate Kid, man. And Karate Kid is just, it's got an awesome soundtrack. I love the fight scenes in it where Miyagi kicks all their asses when they're in the skeleton costumes. It's absolutely fantastic. Love Karate Kid. But number 24 is Karate Kid Part 2. I struggled with this a bit, but I enjoy Karate Kid Part 2 more than Karate Kid. I think it gets to things quicker. And I just really like how they're expanding on the story a little bit more about, it's more Mr. Miyagi's story, right? But their relationship expands. And I like how they take the setting to Japan, Okinawa, where Daniel really learns Miyagi's culture and all that kind of stuff. And it's really a great Father's Day kind of movie, a father-son kind of movie, because Mr. Miyagi's father dies. Daniel didn't have a father. He looks at Mr. Miyagi as a father. And there's just a lot of relationships that are fleshed out in here. And when Mr. Miyagi gets there, there's the conflict between his best friend from years ago who wants to challenge him, a fight to the death. And that's what I really like about this movie, that it's not a tournament at all. Daniel has to fight someone to the death, right? And I love that end fight. I still think it's pretty gritty and brutal, and they're just pounding the piss out of each other, Daniel and Chosen. I just love it. I just love this movie. I think the music is fantastic in it. And yeah, there's just a lot of great character arcs in this, and a lot of good stuff that I think is just better than the Karate Kid. personally. But yeah, Karate Kid 2, man, love it. Number 23, Crossroads, a cult classic, another one with Ralph Macchio. Ralph Macchio just had some heavy hitters in the 80s, man. Had some heavy hitters. I love Crossroads. I'm a guitar player. I picked up the guitar after watching this movie. I love blues. Started picking the blues on the guitar. I love it. This movie's more inspirational than I guess it is great, but I have a blast with this movie about this young music prodigy going on the road with this old blues dude from Mississippi. And he, discovers what the blues and what everything is all about the blues. He kind of lives it instead of just reading it from a book. And there's these religious elements in it about, selling your soul, regretting these decisions. And it all comes together with this big guitar duel at the end with Steve Vai against Ralph Macchio. But it's actually Ry Cooder that you hear. But it's Ralph Macchio doing they kind of trained him to how to make it look like he's playing guitar. But it is an awesome music movie, and it's, if you love the blues, you love guitar, you're just gonna love this flick. It's just awesome.
What's up, guys? This is Lee from Drumdums, and I'd like to thank Jason for including me on his special. And I was lucky enough to be able to talk about one of my favorite movies, Rocky IV. So just real quickly, I'm going to tell you why Rocky IV is so important to me. When I saw this movie, I saw it opening night in the theater. I was 13 years old. And when you think about what is 13 years old, for me, it was, you're a boy, you're a child, then you are a teenager, then you are an adult. And so I was kind of in that transition between boy and teenager. And I think at 13 years old, that might be your most impressionable age. And Rocky, to me, was kind of my hero and probably the most inspiring character still to this day. And to see Rocky IV at that age, and I think everything that movie represents, losing a friend, and then having to face this metaphorical mountain, which is Ivan Drago, and he seems unbeatable. And to me, to convey that on screen is no easy feat. To make this larger-than-life villain, at face value, you would think there's no way Rocky could ever beat him. But by the time Rocky fights the guy, not only do you think he can go toe-to-toe with him, but you think he can win. And to get to that level is not an easy feat. But also, it's just a product of the 80s. I think Rocky IV came out at the exact perfect time, 1985, which I think 85, to me, is one of the most important years in cinema. And I think this movie feels like it came out in 85, all the way from the Cold War struggle. This feels like two countries going at it in the form of people, of boxers. And also down to the robot, which I love the robot in the movie because it feels like it's imprinted in 1985. I know the director's cut took the robot out, and it took some of those 80s vibes out of the movie to try to make it blend in with the rest of the franchise. I give it kudos for that, but do I enjoy it more than the theatrical? Hell no. The theatrical cut is perfection to me, but there's some nostalgia in there too, to be fair. That is a time capsule, and it takes me right back to that moment when I saw that movie and that theater experience, which still to this day, one of the most memorable and exciting theater experiences I have ever had, And I love the final fight in this movie. To me, and Stallone has even stated this, that it is the best on-screen boxing match ever filmed. And I agree with it, you know, and he just states that because of the work that went in. I mean, the guy almost died making that scene. So, yeah, thank you, Jason, for letting me give my thoughts on Rocky IV. Anytime I get a chance to not brag, but I guess just, you know, trumpet this movie, I take the chance. So, anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and thank you, Jason.
RoboCop was just the best. I mean, I saw this film I think it was on release. I think it was actually the first R-rated movie that I ever saw in a cinema, or an 18, as it is in the UK. I'd gone to the cinema with a friend. I think I was 14 years old. We both kind of paid for tickets for Inner Space, I think it was, and snuck into the RoboCop screen. Back then, they used to have intervals in the movies. I sat there and during the interval, and the ice cream lady came in and spotted me. And so she kicked me out. And so for the first year or so, I'd only seen the first half of RoboCop. I think it took it to the point whereas I think it was just after the scene where he chucks the guy out of the window. That was where the interval was. And so I had to wait for it to come out on VHS. And movies coming out on VHS in the UK, it took forever. It took forever. And I remember getting that rental box off the shelf in the video store and taking it home because I was so excited. All I'd had for the last year was the trailer to watch on the start of any other Orion video release. So it was so... You know, the anticipation was off the scale to be able to see the film in full. And when I did, I just kind of fell in love with it. And I remember buying a making of RoboCop, which was around about 25 minutes long. And I would play the hell out of that video, watching all the behind the scenes stuff with Peter Weller getting fit into the suit. And they had a breakdown of all the shootout in the cocaine factory. It was just... The film had left such an impression on me as a kid because it was sci-fi, it was cop film, and it was, I guess, in part horror as well because the gore is off the scale. Emil, I think it was, getting hit by the car when he's fallen into the toxic waste. You've got Kurtwood Smith getting knifed in the neck with RoboCop's prong, whatever that thing is. And I just thought, you know, this was Rob Bottin at his best. Some amazing work, amazing action, a great score, great performances, and at that particular time, so ahead of its time. The humor as well was just fantastic. You know, all these kind of little commercials in between that are spaced out throughout the film. The commercials, the news reports where the president has a brief period of weightlessness. Everything about it was just spot on in terms of keeping the tone of that film right throughout. Violent, but incredibly fun as well. Not an easy thing to do. And Paul Verhoeven just nailed it, I think.
So, what would you little maniacs like to do first?
Hey everybody, it's Beth. Welcome back to my channel. This is Miss 80's Movies and Music, and I was asked by Jason to talk about Over the Top for you guys, one of my favorite films of all time. This movie takes me back to my childhood, watching this film with my dad. Rest in peace, Pops. I miss you to this day. And I just love this film, and I think it deserves a lot more love than hate. I know people give it a lot of crap because they think it's just arm wrestling and truck driving, but there's more to the story than just that. It's about a father and son trying to reconnect and bond and start a life together. And to me, I think that's the beautiful part of the story. The arm wrestling, the truck driving, that's just, you know, icing on the cake, so to speak. But this film I just love it, and I think, you know, each of us can take away something from this film. We all are humans that are trying to be better, trying to do better, and Lincoln Hawk, for example, is a dad that he's failed. He's, you know, just trying to do what's right, and I think that's a beautiful story. So definitely check out Over the Top if you haven't seen it in a long time. I think it's worth a watch. So Jason, thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. Again, this is Beth from Miss 80's. What we do over here is combining the love of movies and music, movie soundtracks. So if that interests you, would love for you guys to come and check out my channel. So thank you guys so much. Have a great day. Be excellent to each other, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Hey Jason, it's Stacy from the Rocky Files. Thank you for including me in this. Your question was, what is my favorite 80s movie? Well, that would be Rocky 3. I absolutely love Rocky 3 because I love the journey that he had to go on. He had to go from great loss to trusting somebody new and to admitting what he was going through internally. And sometimes the most unexpected people come into our lives, offer to help, but offer to help us see things in a completely different way. And that's what Apollo did. He had to train differently. He had to trust somebody new after losing Mickey. And then he had to look at Adrian and say, I'm afraid. And sometimes you just have to admit things you don't want to admit. And she knows him best. And she really, really was there for him and kind of went toe to toe with him to really get him to the truth of the matter, and that this was a daunting task that he was facing. And it was just a different type of journey for Rocky, and it was more internal work, and I really, really enjoyed that. So that's my answer. Rocky 3, best 80s movie that ever came out of that decade. Have a good day.
Coming in at number 17 is Big Trouble in Little China. This is just a blast of a movie. John Carpenter doing like a Chinese fantasy martial arts kind of film. And a lot of the stuff is dated and corny and cheesy, but I love it, man. The movie plays out like a video game. Hear me out on this. It's like the movie, we're going from level to level to level to level. Like the three bad guys in here, you fly through the air and create lightning. It's kind of like Mortal Kombat. Maybe it was an inspiration of Mortal Kombat. I'm not a big video game guy. I don't know, but they remind me something you'd see in a video game. Everything reminds me of something you'd see in a video game in this. And Jack Burton doing his best John Wayne in this is just such a likable character. He's so funny and entertaining. He screws up all the time. He acts like this big tough guy, but he's constantly screwing up, getting freaked out about everything. Everything around him, everybody thinks is normal about this Chinese black magic, and he's just like, he's freaking out all the time. You know what I mean? He goes, I just get a kick out of this character, man, because he's just so hilarious. And it's just a fun story. You'll have a blast with it. And the big fight scene in the middle of Chinatown between the two Chinese gangs, it's awesome. It's still one of my favorite fight scenes. I absolutely love it, man. It's fantastic. You know, there's you get really close fight scenes. You get shootouts in it. The guys, they're taking boards and breaking each other's skulls over it. I mean, it's just awesome. It's just Carpenter did something a bit crazy and unique. I love it for that. I know it wasn't a big success, but I love it. Coming in at number 16 is Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. This one is just a great sequel. One of my favorite sequels of all time. I just love the original crew.
It may be nothing. Garbled communications. You take the ship.
Jim, you proceed from a false assumption. I am a Vulcan. I have no ego to bruise.
I love how they connect Star Trek to one of the 60s episodes with Space Seed. It was originally called where you first introduced the Khan, and he comes back, and just a fantastic villain, man. And it really is based all off Moby Dick. It's all about obsession. You know, Khan stranded on this planet and everyone close to him died, including his wife. And he just wants revenge, and he's just so obsessed with it. Even though he has a ship, he stole a starship. He could go anywhere, but he still wants Kirk. and I just love this character. It's so charismatic, this character. And, you know, they even quote the same lines out of Moby Dick that they put in this. This is really good writing. I like how the uniforms changed and how Star Trek became more naval-like. Now, I'm sure a lot of people don't like that decision, but I think it really suits it. I really like that decision. And a lot going on with Kirk is he's older, and what really motivates him every day. What's driving him? He's an admiral, but he's really not happy in that position. You know, what Spock tells him, what you do great is lead a starship. You know, you're a captain. You know, and he kind of gets that back, and they go on this adventure, and you know, save the day and everything, and this is where Spock dies. There's that huge cliffhanger at the end, and really everything in this is all about friendship. To Spock, it was like logical to save the ship, like he says, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and that's just a heartbreaking scene at the end of that movie, man, with Spock and Kirk, you know, putting their hands against the glass with each other, seeing Spock die. Great stuff in this movie, man. Great ship battles too. You get a lot of cool, probably dated for a lot of you now, but you get some great stuff in here with the ship battles. And, you know, this scene, all the characters, the way they interact with each other, is just awesome. I just have a blast with Star Trek 2. Absolutely love it. Coming at number 15 is Return of the Living Dead. This is absolutely my favorite zombie flick. I just love the tone they went after in this, where it is horror and comedy, and they're just having a blast with it. I mean, you want to have fun with a movie, you put this on. And a lot of the acting may seem over the top or cheesy, but I think it was all directed that way to suit the tone. It's supposed to be that way, and I think a lot of the actors just nailed it in this. Absolutely nailed it. I love all the characters. You know, seeing the stupid shit they all go through, and the freaking, I mean, it's just awesome. And Trash, Leanna Quigley, my favorite character in this. How could, as a little kid, I'd never forget the dance on the graveyard, man. It's just awesome, man. I mean, I love Trash in this. I love all the characters, really. And, you know, it's just, and some things did scare me as a kid when they're sawing the cadaver's head off. You know what I mean? And Frank's like going, oh, he's screaming like this through the whole thing. I just love it. I really like how this movie ends too, where, you know, Tom Matthews jumps through into the attic. He's like, Tina, and it just freeze frames. I think it's great. I have a blast with Return of the Living Dead. Coming at number 11 is Lethal Weapon. I love Lethal Weapon, your buddy cop movie. Mel Gibson and Danny Glover are just dynamic in this movie. They have so much chemistry together. Martin Riggs, played by Mel Gibson, goes on a great arc where he lost his wife, he's suicidal, he's going through a lot of pain and a lot of grief. And, you know, Danny Glover brings them out of it on this journey they go on to stop these mercenaries who are bringing all this cocaine in and stuff like that, drug dealers and stuff. It has great action. It has funny moments, but it's got another tone that I really like, and how consistent they keep it, even though they got a lot of humor going through it. I just love the way Mel Gibson really played this character. Didn't play him too over the top. I just love how badass he is in this. Like when he becomes that lethal weapon, he's just heartless, man. And that end fight with Gary Busey at the end, it's just dirty and grimy and muddy, and you just feel every punch, you know, on the front lawn with the cameras going. It's just great stuff in here, man. Absolutely love Lethal Weapon.
Sean from Fandom Empire. I'm just doing a little video for Jason By the way, good guy, if you haven't yet, click that subscribe button. One of the most honest, outgoing, kind, caring individuals you will ever see on YouTube. So definitely smash that subscribe button to keep up to date with all of his content. The Empire Strikes Back for me is the greatest film ever made. Not the greatest Star Wars film ever made, the greatest film ever made. When you consider that most of this movie was filmed in, I believe, 1978 or 1979. I think it was 78. It really is something remarkable. The acting performances in it are great. George Lucas gets a ton of credit for obviously conceptualizing the story of Star Wars. However, I think the guy that doesn't get enough credit for his work on The Empire Strikes Back is the late Irvin Kershner. Without him, without his character pieces and character development, that movie just doesn't hit the same. So The Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars fan or not, is a must-see for everybody.
Hey everyone, this is Kyle Curse Flett from Flett Movies and Pop Culture 13, here to discuss one of my all-time favorite 80s movies of all time, Back to the Future. It is definitely a classic, iconic. It definitely defines cinema in the 80s. It's definitely one of the iconic films of the 80s. It's got an iconic cast. Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd as Marty McFly and Doc Brown. Their chemistry on screen is definitely one of the best chemistries on screen of all time. It's also got Crispin Glover as Marty McFly's dad. You're right. And of course, Doc Brown. You can't go wrong with Christopher Lloyd as Doc Brown. He's so iconic. He's so fun. He's a great actor. Great Scott. And originally, Michael J. Fox wasn't going to be Marty McFly. It was shows, but I'm definitely glad that they recasting brought in Michael J. Fox. He was perfect as Marty McFly. It's so well directed. It's so much fun. It is a blast. So many great dialogues, great lines. I'm so happy it picked DeLorean as its time machine car, and it definitely made DeLorean popular. And I love the third act with the Times Square and the town hall and everything. It's such a great third act, definitely set up. And I love the fact at the end it sets up for Back to the Future 2, and it definitely kicked off one of the greatest trilogies of all time. And the Back to the Future is just phenomenal time. It's awesome. It's great cast. Great roles. Another great actor who played Biff. He was great too. Great villains, and so well dressed. Robert, one of his best films, definitely defined his film career for sure. And I want to thank J-Man from Backtrack Cinema for letting me be part of this top 50s, 80s favorite films project. So I want to cheers everyone, and I'm happy to be part of everyone who's part of this project. Have a good night, day, everyone. See you all later.
Coming at number 8 is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and this is my absolute favorite comedy with John Candy. I love this guy so much, like I've said before. Steve Martin trying to get home to his family for Thanksgiving. This is the movie you watch every Thanksgiving, and this is so much heart to this film. As funny as it is, you got great laughs to the whole thing, but there's just so much heart to it. And like a lot of John Hughes films, there's always that heartbeat going through it, you know what I mean? I love seeing the situations these two get into, and I just love how they're so opposite. You know, one's very conservative, introverted, one's very extroverted, you know what I mean? And John Candy's this, in a lot of ways, he has no filter. He just says what's on his mind all the time. I love that moment in the car where John Candy tells him, you play with your balls a lot. Steve Martin's like, I don't play with my balls. So witty and sarcastic, the dialogue. I'm sure a lot of it was embellished, and I have to put this one on every year, man. I just love this movie to death. When I was a kid, me and my brother, we rented it so many times before we ended up buying it. But yeah, I love this flick. Coming at number 7 is Jason Lives. I love this film. This was my gateway to horror. I love seeing Tom Matthews play Tommy Jarvis. We get Tommy Jarvis coming back, digging up Jason because he can't get rid of the hallucinations. Jason's like taunting him even from the grave. And a bolt of lightning comes down. Why not? Let's copy Frankenstein. Let's do it. Let's go for an old monster movie feel, and it's fantastic. I just love this, man. And seeing Jason come out of the grave, that opening is just so fantastic. I did something that I think Friday the 13th needed at that time. Is it gave it some humor, gave it some more style. A lot of the shots and the cinematography are so great. It is so well lit. I mean, I just love it that they add kids to it. I love how Jason goes back to a camp. We're at a camp again. I think the kills are great for the most part. CJ Graham is a badass Jason, a more Terminator, like on a mission kind of Jason to get back to that camp. I mean, you get so many elements in this. You get some comedy. You get some action, like a car chase. You get the slasher element in it. There's a meta, the breaking the fourth wall kind of in this movie. I think it's great, and it's just such a personal movie to me. First horror movie I've ever watched, and first horror movie I ever watched with my mom, and she watched the whole thing with me. I love this movie, man. I will always put this movie on. I watch this like 6 times a year. I love it so much. It's just so accessible and entertaining and fun. Coming at number 6 is The Thing. I mean, I've been watching this one again for so many years, ever since I was a little wee kid, and the practical effects hold up so well, man. It's just really amazing how well they hold up, and really deals with the paranoia with this creature and everything. I just love the concept of this creature where it can imitate anybody and perfectly, and it just allows a filmmaker to go, man, just imagine what you could do with that. And John Carpenter, the way he sets the mood and the tone and the way he creates paranoia within this group, because it could be anybody, and that's what's so scary. How do you trust anybody? And it just starts making people go crazy, and shit just gets out of hand in this movie, man. But it's awesome. It's just one of the best horror films of all time. It's unfortunate that it wasn't a huge success at the time, but over the years, more often than not, I see this as most people's favorite horror film. At least one of them, at least in their top 5. I rarely see someone say anything bad about The Thing. The Thing, and a great score too by Anicio Morricone. He just drove in a great score, man. Just really has that kind of that mimicking the heartbeat of a human, but it's like dun 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 dun. Like a human heart's kind of like dun 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 dun. You know what I mean? Got that, and this is kind of like this offbeat kind of thing, and I love The Thing. What more can I say about The Thing, man? It's great. All right, everyone, we're in our top 5. I mean, these top 5, I love these movies so much. They are so good. And coming at number 5 is A Nightmare on Elm Street. Love this movie, man. The introducing the Freddy Krueger. Nancy Thompson, played by Heather Langenkamp, is one of my favorite final girls of all time. Wes Craven just created something very unique and different at the time, and kind of breathed a new life to the slasher genre like he did with Scream years later. I love the look of Freddy, just the whole idea of Freddy, how he comes into your dreams. Just think how scary that is. Adding a psychological component to the slasher genre is just amazing. Robert Englund just perfected this character. He is so good as Freddy Krueger. And, there's not many kills, but the kills are so effective, man. Tina's kill is probably the greatest kill in horror history. It's fantastic, man. I mean, we never seen something like that before. It was such a unique kill. The way she goes up, spins around, and she's yelling and shrieking on the ceiling while Freddy's, slice her open and stuff like that. It's just a great movie. The only thing with this movie is that lousy ending, man. There's just a real kind of a cheap ending that, you got to have this cliffhanger. You got to have this jump scare that everyone feels like you had to have, which wasn't Wes's idea. That was Robert Shea's idea. But, yeah, if they just didn't have that in there. But yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street's fantastic. Coming out number 4 is Aliens. Man, I love Aliens. I just love the action in this movie. I like how they went for more of an action movie, but there are a lot of horror elements still in it. All the characters are just fantastic. They're so entertaining. They're so engaging. You like them all. You know what I mean? And they kind of all go on these little character arcs, like Bill Paxton's character is this real freaking freaks out once the shit hits the fan, turns into an ultimate pussy, but he's still a soldier at the end of the day, and he goes out like a soldier. And I like how a lot of these characters, have these little tiny arcs in it. And, Ripley and Newt, it's just such a great relationship. And as Ripley, she's got this PTSD. She was away in space for so long, for 57 years, that her daughter died of old age, so she's lost her daughter, she's lost her mother's side, and then you got the alien queen, so that battle at the end is like Mama Bear against Mama Bear, and it gets vicious and nasty, and Sigourney Weaver just plays it fantastically. She even got nominated for an Oscar for this movie. Like, she's fantastic in this movie, man. Just love Aliens. We used to watch it all the time as kids. I watch this movie all the time. At least once a year it goes on.
What's going on, everyone? I'm Spooky Clutter, the Dark Aether Files podcast, and I'm here today to talk about Predator for a bit. I want to thank J-Man for including me in his top 50 80s action films, or 80s films. Predator is a personal favorite of mine. It's one of the films that I grew up with a lot, or one of the franchises. It wasn't just the first Predator, but for the sake of this particular video, the first Predator is a perfect blend of the 80s action films that were popular at the time and a sort of science fiction slasher horror type. The irony being that both the 80s action films and slashers were big because of Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween. And Predator was a sort of perfect storm of what happens when you take the invincible action heroes of those 80s films like Rambo, and you pit them up against like Jason Voorhees. From what I heard, the sort of joke or running gag was Rocky's fought all sorts of characters, and it's about time he fights an alien. You know, what would happen if he fought against an alien? And so, boom, you have Predator, directed by John McTiernan, who eventually did Die Hard as well. But Predator, just like, for example, the creature design, it's a very unique creature. The dreadlocks, the mandibles, it's all a very unique design created by Stan Winston. Of course, if you know the history, the original Predator design looked nothing like it. But thank goodness that Arnold Schwarzenegger suggested Stan Winston, because otherwise we would have a very different Predator, and it probably wouldn't have been as successful as it is today. Of course, we can't forget about Arnold Schwarzenegger of Terminator fame. He does an amazing job as Dutch. The first 30 minutes of this film feel like your traditional 80s action film, and after those 30 minutes, when we get Hawkins, the comic relief character, to get killed off, we know that things are getting serious. It's a very unique film. Like I said earlier, it's a really good blend of the two popular genres, but it's handled in such a way that it's like a natural flow. Some movies have an issue with trying to balance the humor and the seriousness, but I think that Predator does a really good job of this. And it's definitely in the top 10 80s films for me personally. There's a lot of 80s films that I enjoy. With that said, Predator is almost number one. I'm still sort of in my head thinking about where I would place some of these films, but for Predator, I grew up with it. It was one of the first horror films or R-rated films that I watched, and my dad said, okay, you like Star Wars, you like Aliens, well, here you go. Here's Predator. And of course, ever since then, I collected a whole bunch of Predator memorabilia. As you can see, I got the mask back there. I have a bunch of figures, posters. I love Predator. It's an all-time classic, and if you haven't watched it yet, do yourself a favor and go do it. So, with that all being said, thank you for watching. Make sure you support J-Man. He does a fantastic job on his channel. And with that being said, remember that the entertainment is out there.
I still remember when my dad rented this and how blown away I was about this movie. Like, the moment I saw it, I went out, when it was over, I got my toy gun out, and I was out there shooting predators in the backyard. I just love Predator, and it's one of my favorite scores of a movie too. Love it. Coming in at number 2 is the Terminator from 1984. I love the Terminator. I think I've talked about this movie many times now. We've did a watch party on this movie. It's awesome, guys. It's just one of these movies that mixes so many genres. You could say it's slasher and a horror, and it's sci-fi and action. I mean, it's got some great action set pieces in it, but it's also got this great tone that's brooding and it's dark and has something to say about, you know, where we're going in the future with artificial intelligence and how it could be used against us, you know, just great themes in there. This movie is a love story that's masked as a sci-fi horror flick, if you will. And Arnold is this, I can't see anyone playing a Terminator like he did. He did such a good job as the Terminator in this. Still one of my favorite Arnie performances. Michael Biehn, I consider him one of the greatest action guys of the 80s, even though, you know, he did this and he did Aliens and he kind of went after more, you know, different kind of roles. He didn't really put himself into that action genre, but he's one of the best, man. Absolutely one of the best. And Linda Hamilton, I just love her as Sarah Connor. Sarah Connor is one of my favorite, if not my favorite female character of all time in cinema. I just love her, man, in this, and the arc she goes on where she, you know, gets a glimpse of what she has to become, you know, because of the story she's been told of what she has to do with her son being this leader of this resistance. And she just becomes a badass in this by the end of this movie, man. And Stan Winston just knocks the practical effects out of the water in this. I know a lot of it's dated now, but the stuff that he actually made for the final sequence there is still pretty fantastic, man. Terminator is just amazing. I absolutely love the Terminator.
Hey guys, it's Knight from the Nightwatch Zone. When Jason asked me to pick a favorite 80s movie, it was really difficult. I mean, I love 80s movies. I grew up on them. My family is a huge fan of those movies. But picking one, it was tough, but the one that I did go with is actually probably the movie that got me started, you know, with a love of a lot of these 80s movies that become favorites of mine, especially when we talk about action. And I'm talking about First Blood from 1982, starring the legendary Sylvester Stallone. Now, this was a movie that my mother brought home to the family to watch. And this was back in the day when we would go to Blockbuster and rent movies and stuff like that. So she brought home this movie called First Blood. Me and my younger brother, we had no idea what this movie was about. So we start watching this movie, and you're just really invested in Sylvester Stallone playing this character of John Rambo, you know, coming to a town to visit a friend, finding out he's dead, and then just being treated like dog shit and having to, you know, fight and eventually really fight for his life. The action is fantastic. Sylvester Stallone's performance is so underrated. It's not about the amount of dialogue that he has in the movie. It's about what he does with the small amount of dialogue, but also his physicality, you know, showing all these different emotions that are just right beneath the surface. And so anyways, First Blood is fantastic. Richard Crenna, the late great Richard Crenna, was great in this movie as Troutman, and Brian Dennehy, of course, also gone too soon, but was great in this as well. It was just the type of movie where you had these two sides that were at odds and you're just wondering what's going to happen. Like me personally, I remember being a little kid and thinking to myself, how is Rambo going to survive when you literally have the whole town coming after him, all the sheriffs and cops and so forth. It was just fantastic when he gets stuck in the cave underground, and it seems like there's no way for him to escape, for him to survive, and he finds a way. So you're constantly put on this roller coaster with this character, and it's just really good. The character obviously became a lot more bombastic as the sequels went on, but the one thing that always kind of held true and remained the same is that Rambo himself was always a character that you rooted for him. You really did. And that, to me anyways, is a credit to Sylvester Stallone and his performance. It was just magnificent. This first movie, definitely a lot more dramatic in its tone. And I think that's also why it stands out for me. Like, I will never ever forget the first time I watched this movie. It was just mind-blowing. And it set me, as well as my brother, on a path to being huge Sylvester Stallone fans, which we still are to this day, huge fans. So anyways, when we talk about favorite 80s movies, there's no doubt in my mind that I have to talk about First Blood. So anyways, thanks guys for watching. And Jason, thank you so much for inviting me to do this. And anyways, guys, keep watching movies. Peace out.
Hell yeah, Knight from the Nightwatch Zone. He said it all, man. Number one, First Blood for me, man. This is my favorite 80s film of all time. I mean, Rocky's my favorite film. This is my favorite 80s film. I love the character of Rambo, and people seem to forget, Rambo became this larger than life character that's really entered into the pop culture. But the first film was so gritty and so grounded in seeing Rambo, being bullied by this police force, having all his friends in Vietnam die, and he's the last one. He just doesn't know where to go. He's got serious PTSD. Society doesn't know what to do with him. It's a very kind of Frankenstein kind of story, being this outcast, and we can relate to that. How many of us can relate to us being an outcast and feeling like we don't fit in? Great action moments. I mean, some of that when he breaks out of the police station is still one of the best things I've ever seen. And it's just everything, the built up tension with it, Stallone's performance at the end of the movie is just one of the greatest performances he's ever given. You know what I mean? You think this guy's going to go out into a blaze of glory, but no, he implodes and he breaks down and everything comes out of him. And, it's just fantastic. This movie is absolutely amazing. I throw this movie on so many times throughout the year. I absolutely love First Blood. So that's it, guys. That is my top 50 80s movies of all time. I just love these movies so much. This is my childhood, man. This is my childhood, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel, and please subscribe to all my guests. And to all my guests, I cannot thank you all enough.
Thank you.
Your video entries and what you did to make this production value and all that. All your stories are just so awesome. I mean, you've all become very good friends of mine. I love all your videos, even though if I don't watch them all. Go check out all these channels, guys. I'll put all of them in the description below. They'll all be there. And yeah, this was such a blast to do. I just love 80s films so much. I love top 50s. I love doing these top 50 videos, man. They're just amazing to do. They're so fun to put together. I thank you guys for watching this top 50. My name is Jason. You're watching Backtrack Cinema. I will see you on the next video, and I will see you in the movies. Cheers.